Rendering an entire continent in Blender is definitely not optimal, but it looks really cool. The only problem? I'm looking at about 480 hours of rendering. So let's see if we can solve it. This last week I've been focusing on optimizing my scenes for Sir Knyte. I'm looking at about 480 hours of rendering, so I need to optimize each of my scenes so I can avoid adding time as much as possible. So today I wanted to talk about how I've optimized my scenes in Sir Knyte. I think that looped, but it works. So my problems have been that my renders have gone from 1 minute of rendering to 3 to 4 minutes or even longer per frame. And one of the first things I noticed is I'm maxing out my VRAM. This all started when I began working on my scenes for Huron's Village, and I also just had developed a grass setup using GeoNode. The grass looked really great, but it substantially added render time to my scene. And this wasn't the only culprit. I also am rendering an entire atmosphere in each of my scenes, which adds at least 45 seconds to each frame. But it's non-negotiable there. I have to have that. Also, I utilize GeoNodes to do all the foliage, trees, distant stuff, rocks, everything. And these are also very big hitters on my performance. And I have to have them dense because being someone who works in the woods, the forests and everything are really dense in real life. So having this conundrum on my hands, I have a choice. I can either remove the grass, thin out my forests, or I could sit down with my geometry nodes and see if I can solve this issue. So an idea popped into my head on how I could optimize all these geometry nodes instances, and I decided to look into camera culling for my geometry node. Camera culling for GeoNodes has been really weird. A few years ago it was a very archaic system, it felt like, to get camera culling to work in Blender, and you would have to set up each individual camera, but thankfully Blender has updated and allowed you to have cool things like active camera and other stuff like that to make my life substantially easier. So I watched a few videos on how people set up these camera culling nodes, and I kind of Frankensteined my own fairly optimal camera culling node, and it's been plug and play so far for my Sir Knyte scenes. I have found that my implementation of camera culling works really well for grass and distant LOD objects. Obviously, I may run into issues where this system doesn't work, like my previous camera culling system I used a few years ago, but that'll be a road that I'll cross when I get there. It works right now. So implementing this into my scene, the statistics speak for themselves, and it's a pretty awesome method to squeeze out that performance. Now, camera culling can only get me so much performance, but there are some other areas too that I can squeeze out a few extra seconds. I like to call these my destructive optimizations, because normally once I have a scene finished and I've already moved on to other scenes, so a majority of my landscape will be deleted if it's not in the immediate area or in the camera view. Distant landscapes are often cut down to the bare minimum, and if they're obscured by the clouds in the distance, they're just not even rendered at all. Overall, I'm happy with the optimizations I made this week for my scenes in Sir Knyte, and it honestly wasn't as big of a nightmare as I thought it would be. And the grass, well, it looks really good. And I wanted to say thank you for watching, and if you are by any chance interested in Sir Knyte or the history that I've had with it, I've recently made a video going over the 8-year journey that I've had with Sir Knyte. I would appreciate it if you went and watched it. I also have a playlist of all my Sir Knyte related content, because way back in the day I made a Sir Knyte devlog for my first film. Also, I'd love any feedback on this format, because I am kind of awful at it. So please let me know where I can improve, or if you want it to be more technical, less technical, just let me know. I'm going to try to, hopefully the next one's better. So thank you for watching. Have a great day.
Oh my gosh! The biggest piece of metal you've ever seen in your life! Big metal. Big metal doesn't want you to see this. Oh my lord. To Biden's freaking Biden's bunker. Biden bunker.